Welcome back, everybody. I'm your host, Kelly Sparks, aka Red Beard. So, I'm going to go over 5 commonly asked questions to yours truly that I get most of the time. We're going to go ahead and start this off quick. I'm drinking a little Elijah Craig. I'm a little tired. I'm going to put some put some outtakes. So this is probably the 3rd or 4th time I'm trying to record this. So I'll put some outtakes at the end. Enjoy. Whatever. So, question number 1. What's the difference between whiskey and bourbon? So, all bourbon is whiskey, but not all whiskey is bourbon. Whiskey is defined as grain distilled spirits. So, bourbon has a specific mash bill that it must be and certain requirements mandated by the U.S. government to call itself a bourbon. So the next question, what makes a bourbon? Bourbon is at least 51% corn, and the rest of the grain, the mash bill, is made up normally between rye and barley. Now, from time to time, you will have some distillers opting to switch out the rye for wheat in their mash bill to give it a different flavor profile. But beyond that, beyond the mash bill, all bourbon must be aged in new charred oak barrels. Now, from there, you're like, new charred oak barrels, well, how long does it have to be aged? Well, that's the next question. Is there a minimum time bourbon has to be aged? We should have... So, is there a minimum time that bourbon must be aged? The answer is no. All it says, per the U.S. government, is bourbon must be aged in new charred oak barrels. There is no minimum time. Now, with that said, there are certain bourbons and variations of bourbons that have age restrictions. Now, if you look at a bottle, you turn over a bottle. I got one behind me. Right here. Knocking shit off. So this one is a bottle, I believe, from Missouri. If you turn on the back of most of these bottles, if they are aged less than 3 years, I believe it's 3 years. Anything less than 3 years old, No, I'm wrong. Anything less than 4 years old must state an approximate age statement on the bottle. So this one specifically says aged a minimum of 1 year. Wood Hat Bourbon Rubenesque. Okay. Now, with that said, to have a straight bourbon whiskey, it must be aged for at least 2 years. Beyond that, the only other statement beyond the straight bourbon is bottled in bond. Now, bottled in bond has to be aged at least 4 years. So the bottled in bond, I'm not even going to get into that. You can just Google that. There's a whole plethora of other regulations for bottled in bond whiskeys or bourbons. Well, bottled in bond whiskeys in general, because there are some corn whiskeys, mellow corn, bottled in bond. But beyond that, the only two variations of bourbon that must have a specific age statement are the straight bourbon, which is at least 2 years, and the bottled in bond, which is at least 4 years. Now, beyond that, if you do see a bourbon with an age statement on that, all that is telling you is the age of the youngest barrel used in that makeup. So if it's a 12-year-old, let's say W.L. Weller, or, hey, Elijah Craig, 12 years, aged for 12 years right here, doesn't mean that every whiskey in this bottle was only aged for 12 years. It means the youngest whiskey in this, because it is a small batch, which is going to be the next question. It means the youngest whiskey in that bottle was aged for 12 years. So, whenever you hear somebody say, and you don't have to be pretentious about it, whenever somebody tells you, oh, bourbon, whiskey, whatever, has to be aged for at least 4 years before it can be called a bourbon. Well, that's not true. It just has to be aged in a new charred oak barrel. They all have to be oak. So, beyond that, the next question I have is, what are the different types of whiskey? What does small batch? What does small batch mean? What does single barrel mean? What does cask strength mean? So, small batch is a clever marketing term to make you think that there is limited quantities on what was used to make this. Now, if you look at these bottles, now the big distillers like Jim Beam, Heaven Hill, Wild Turkey. Does Wild Turkey have a small batch? Anyway, I think Rare Breed might be a small batch. But anyway, so their small batch could be 1,000 bottles, whereas a small batch of a micro distillery could be 10 barrels. Oh, I said bottles. 1,000 barrels. Their small batch could be thousands of barrels blended together to get certain flavor profiles, whereas a smaller distillery could be 10 barrels for a small batch. Too many B's in this barrels, bottles, batch bullshit. Yeah, too many B's. So beyond that, you have cask strength, which is, this is a barrel proof. Same thing as cask strength. It is the proof of the whiskey coming straight from the barrel, unfiltered, uncut. That's your cask strength, your barrel proof, all that good stuff. Single barrel. Single barrel is the only whiskey, period. If you see a bottle that says single barrel, do I got a single barrel up here? I don't see one. No, I don't have a single barrel. Anyway, so if you see a bottle on the shelf, and it could be bourbon, it could be whiskey, it could be scotch, it could be Irish, whatever. If it says single cask, will you hush? Single cask, I'm going to beat that dog. Single barrel. Those are the only two on the shelf that are not blended whiskey. So this right here, a small batch 12-year-old Elijah Craig barrel proof, is technically a blended whiskey. Now, it's not blended with a bunch of different types of whiskeys, like, say, Johnny Walker. They have 40 or more different types of grain spirits that they blend together, and malts and whatever. This is a blend of different 12-plus-year-old Elijah Craig barrels. Yet, it's still blended. So, the only type of non-blended whiskeys you'll find on the shelf, say single barrel or single cask. Now, all of that said, the one that I thought of that I went and I handpicked some different, I Googled most common questions about bourbon. And I know I'm just kind of, this is quick, down and dirty, but this video is mainly for the people who are new to this, to the whiskey scene. Most of my subscribers probably already know these answers. But the one that I get more often than not about, I'll just say it, how to pick your next bourbon or how to pick your next whiskey. I've had people ask me all the time, well, what should I do? Like, I've been drinking this, where do I need to go from here? I like this, what do I need to go to next? Sometimes you can find good whiskey tubers, such as yours truly, and you can go back through their plethora of videos. I've used plethora twice in this video now. But you can go back in their videos, and if you tend to agree with that person, you kind of have a good basis on what you might and might not like. Now, if you were like me when you first got into whiskey, and there were not any, well, actually Ralphie might have been the only channel around at the time, back in 2014. One of the only channels, but at the time, I wasn't watching YouTube whiskey reviews. I was just out buying stuff. So, come here, God, just come here, come up here, Bonnie. You can't whine if you're not going to be a part of the conversation. You're just making background noise, and I want to slap the piss out of you. So, how to pick your next bourbon is my final question. The best thing I can tell somebody to do, and normally I had a kid at the grocery store. This is kind of what spurred this question on. Works at the grocery store. He's 21 years old. Doesn't have a whole lot of money. I asked him, I'm like, he knows that I do the whiskey reviews. He's seen me wearing the shirts and whatever, and we make small talk while he pushes the buggy to the car. But he asked me, hey man, I'm looking for a good bourbon. I'm looking for a good whiskey, good bourbon. Do you have any recommendations? So, when I hear that question, I automatically go, well, you know, they got this Elijah Craig barrel proof there you would just love. You can't do that with people. You can't do that with 21-year-old kids who are not experienced, because this would just completely blow them out of the water, and they're like, man, that old guy, same thing I said, that old guy doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. So, whenever I hear that question, whenever somebody presents it to me, my first question is, well, what are you drinking now? From that, I can deduce several options. The second question is, what's your budget? How much do you want to spend on this bottle? There, with those two, that narrows the field down tremendously. And if you still have if you're still having trouble helping that person find something to drink, ask them, what do you like? Well, what else are you drinking? Do you like coffee? Do you drink your coffee black? Do you drink it with a bunch of sweeteners and creamers? Do you like bitter flavors? Do you like sweeter flavors? I mean, those questions right there can help you point somebody in the right direction. So, long story longer, the kid at the grocery store, I asked him, I was like, well, how much you got to spend? He's like, well, I've got $14 on my checking card and $5 in my pocket. And I said, okay, well, you're kind of limited on what you can get. And then I asked him, I was like, well, what have you had in the past? And I think he said Crown or something like that. I was like, well, do you like sweeter stuff? Whatever. I asked him the normal questions. So I pointed him towards Benchmark Old Number 8. The Buffalo Trace flagship. It's the flagship bottom shelf bourbon. It's aged for 3 years. And I believe it's a straight bourbon. I think it says straight bourbon on it. But it's the same mash bill that they have. The Buffalo Trace bourbon, Colonel E.H. Taylor bourbons, George T. Stagg Jr. That's all the same mash bill as Benchmark Old Number 8. He went out and purchased himself a fifth of it, and I think it's like $14 out the door, somewhere around there, 14 and change. I saw him a few days ago, and he told me he went and got it, and he was like, man, that stuff is smooth. He was like, it's really, really good. I was like, dude, it's very underrated whiskey. I mean, people walk past it on the shelf all day because of the price. So, I know this is a lot. I'm going to post more stuff at the end of this video, so stay tuned. I got some bloopers that I'm tired. It's been a long day. I've had a few drinks. I'm not thinking straight, and I'm not good at the Q&As yet. Come here. Come here. Get up here. Don't look at me like that in your face. Quit looking at me with that face. So, that's all I got. Oh, you're asking for it. You're asking for it. So, that's all I got. Those are my 5 most commonly asked questions about bourbon. If you want me to answer other questions in my own particular manner, just comment below and I'll jot them down. And then we'll do this again next Saturday. So, any questions, even if it's personal, for the most part. So, whatever. That's all I got. Hope you enjoyed it. A candid Q&A, and with yours truly, the Bearded Idiot. So, don't forget, check the description below for all the links to help out around the house with the bills and whatnot. Don't forget to check out the Bearded Idiots. Like always, drink some whiskey, share with your friends and family, help people out. Don't be a pretentious a-hole. I mean, if somebody says, oh, I love whiskey, I like drinking whiskey, and you ask them, like, oh, okay, what are you drinking? I like Crown and Coke. Don't be an asshole. So they're like, oh, that's cool, man. Crown and Coke's good. I drank it a lot when I was 14. So, you don't have to be pretentious to help people out. So, that's all I got. Y'all have a good night. Be safe. Don't drink and drive. Take care of yourself. Like always, drink some whiskey. Share with your friends and family. Have a nice day. Welcome back, everybody. I'm your host, Kelly Sparks. Hey, Redbeard. So, today I've got a new video series that I'm going to start doing. Probably try to post every Saturday. Commonly asked questions. Today's going to be about bourbon. So you're welcome to comment below. Comment on this video. If there's any kind of question you want me to go over, and it can be about anything. Today's going to be about bourbon. But in the future, it can be about Scotch, Irish whiskey, Bonnie, the cat, my beard, whatever. In general, what I've done in the past, life stories, it doesn't matter. We'll just get some Q&A, get some interaction, and go from there. Does that feel good, Bonnie? Yeah. So, I'm drinking a little bit of Elijah Craig. And this is not one of the questions that I'm going to go over, but Elijah Craig is supposedly the person who first invented bourbon. So he was an old Baptist preacher, transported his whiskey in charred barrels, and found out, and I think the story goes that the wood he used for the barrel was actually from a barn that burned down, I think. So the burnt wood was used to make the barrel, and then he transported the whiskey. And back in those days, it would take months to transport something. So when it got to its destination, they were like, "Oh, what is this? It has color and different flavors." So good. So my first question, I got my notepad right here in front of me. This is totally off the cuff. It's about 10 o'clock at night. I've worked all day. I did deadlifts after work. I might even post a short clip of my deadlift, my last set at the end. So I'm just tired and trying to get some content made. I apologize for not posting anything yesterday. Just ran out of time. I need to talk about the article that is going to be coming out in Whiskey Advocate and Cigar Aficionado. But on to the video at hand. What's the difference between bourbon and whiskey? That's question number one that I get more often than not. Because they're like, I hear people all the time telling me, oh, I like whiskey, but I'm not a big fan of bourbon. I'm like, okay, well, technically, bourbon is whiskey, but not all whiskeys are bourbon. So that's like saying a Ford Taurus. That's stupid. Anyway, I don't like that. I'm going to have to edit that. So, question number one. What's the difference between whiskey and bourbon? Well, all bourbon is whiskey, but not all whiskey is bourbon. Bourbon has a certain mash bill and characteristics and... the hell was that? I might be too tired for this video. And you're just being loud. So, I might just splice these together. Alright. Carry on. Let's power through it. So, question number one. What's the difference between bourbon and whiskey? Well, all bourbon is whiskey, but not all whiskey is bourbon. Bourbon has a requirements to make it bourbon, which I will go over in the next question. So that was question number one. Easy peasy. Question number two, what makes a bourbon? So bourbon has requirements, like I said earlier. It has to be at least 51% corn, and the rest of the mash bill can be made up of other grains. More often than not, it's grains that are either rye or barley. Now, some distilleries malt the barley to help with the process, or they can have unmalted barley. Sometimes they replace rye with fuck, I think I'm too tired for this video. Will you shut up? Quit whining. I just want to crush your face. Crush it. Crush your face. Crush your face. Crush your face. Crush your face. I need to trim your nails. I got the nail trimmer. Yeah. I think I'm just going to post this video as is. I'm tired. Oh well. Let's start it over. Let's start over, Bunny. Oh, we got 7 minutes. Welcome back, everybody. I'm your host, Kelly Sparks, aka Red Beard. So, today I have 5 commonly questions. Shut up! Shut up! Shut up! Shut up! Shut your face! I'm gonna slap you. Slap you!